So I had a lot on my mind lately with a lot of the politics going on around the world, and so I decided to try my hand at podcasting and just sort of get a lot of stuff off my chest. Maybe work through some of the thoughts I had in my head a little bit, and try and refine them. Maybe try and sort of work through them a little bit, um, and try and sort of figure out some things. And so today I just wanted to sort of talk about something that's been bothering me for a while, um, with the left, and how there is this kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's just kind of like it's not really a divide. It's just kind of like uh, uh, uh these problem factions. These two sort of the two large domineering factions on the left that aren't they don't necessarily um conform to sort of old school um ideas of like the specific Marxist tendencies, the specific categories of ideological um division. It's not like this group and they correspond to this specific movement and this specific period and this, and then this other group, and this is more about sort of leftism more broadly, especially in the present. But then it's definitely sort of a domineering force within Marxism as well, um, wherein there's these two tendencies where, on the one hand, you have a group that is so theory obsessed, to the point of where it's just kind of debilitating for them, where they can't actually see the conditions around them or understand the world around them. They're just kind of obsessed with dogmatically trying to push and preach, like, not even like new developments in the theory either, because they ignore all of that shit and they're like only on the old stuff, only on like the ancient, like 1800s Marxist texts, or some other kind of stuff where it's all they care about is the reading and the reading, and you got to do the reading. And it's like, yeah, you got to do the reading, but that's all they do. That's all they care about. And all their apparent kind of praxis is oriented around getting more people to do the reading, finding new ways to sort of reframe the reading, finding new ways to um, push the reading and push the theory. But the biggest thing seems to be just disparaging anyone who isn't following the theory to this dogmatic degree, to the extent where it's like they're yelling at people for using the wrong terminology, or um, yell, yelling at people for um, i- following the wrong Marxist theorists or whatever. So that one group, right, the theory obsessed, and then you've got the ones that are just so obsessed with praxis, and they just sort of they disavow any theory, they hate theory, to a point where it's kind of getting to an anti-intellectual position at this point. This is the problem. It's getting to a very kind of like, I hate reading unironically. I refuse to read. You trying to force me to read is ableist. You trying to force me to read is bigoted. It's insulting. The writers are all racist. Whatever excuse they can come up with to just justify that they're lazy, that they don't want to actually engage in any political thought or theory. They're not just lazy, but just like willfully ignorant. These are people who are just, they like being stupid. They want to be stupid. They like being stupid, and they just refuse to read any kind of work at all whatsoever. They just want to go out and do stuff. And that's great, going out, doing stuff in the streets. It's very romantic. Oh, we're going to go on a march and we're going to demonstrate our anger against the state. We're going to go do a picket or a demo outside this building and show everyone, what we were thinking. And, and it's the reality is, you need both theory and praxis. This shouldn't be a hot take. This shouldn't be um a new thing you're hearing. Especially for any Marxists out there, this shouldn't be new to you. But it is just a fact, and it's baked into the theory. So if you've read the theory, you should know this. But if you're sort of completely just being divorced from the theory whatsoever, then you don't know this at all, and it's that creates a problem. But I think the bigger problem is the fact that people that do read the theory apparently don't understand the theory because they don't put it into any kind of application. They refuse to apply it to present conditions or bring it into real world, try and actually enact some kind of change in the real world, or bring about any kind of meaningful um movement, trying to build a real movement. No, they refuse to do that. And so you have these two groupings, and where we need to be is kind of in the middle of these two groupings. We need to be recognizing that it's important to read theory, and also recognizing it's important to actually put it into practice, to actually engage in praxis. One is not more important than the other. They are equally important. They need to be um, done together. You need to read theory to inform your praxis, and you need praxis to inform your theory as well. That's the other thing. That's a big thing, right? This isn't new. This isn't novel. I'm not coming up with anything new here. This is just Marxist thought, right? This is Mao's thought. This is Mao Zedong thought. This is something he was saying when he was fighting the Japanese and fighting the Kuomintang. He was saying, yeah, we need to do theory. We also need to do praxis. And you need to do one both at the time, same time. He wrote books like or he wrote more articles or statements like oppose book worship, and he wrote like on practice, which is really good. These are works where he's sort of talking about, okay, you need to sort of engage in actual sort of real world material practice, but you also need that theory to inform you. You need that theory to guide you. And he's a guy who's written probably so much goddamn theory. Mao wrote a lot of theory. A lot of it's short. A lot of it he didn't write at any point, I don't think, like an actual book, so to speak, like a Das Kapital or a State and Revolution or anything. It's not like a substantial work where it's like hundreds and hundreds of pages. He wrote like these short, concise pieces that were meant to just be sort of distributed rapidly throughout the People's Liberation Army. And so his language is great because it's very like short and to the point. It's all been translated. You can find it very easily and very freely online. So, if you were going to begin with any theory, people who are interested in practice out there, learn the theory from a guy who was writing theory while taking part in practical action, while he was waging a war against the forces of capital, against the forces of imperialism, against despotism, against reaction. While he was building a revolution, he was writing these works, these short articles. You could read a page a day. You read a work a day, something like that. You can sort of draw a lot from him, and you probably end up learning a lot about Chinese history during that period. But that's just an example. He was a guy who was pushing this idea, and he's not a guy who came up with that idea either. It's something Marx argued for. It's something Lenin argued for. Lenin, when he was writing which one was it? Was it State and Revolution? Whereas like came out in 1917. It was running in 1917, and then guess what happened? The Bolshevik Revolution happens, and he's like, "Oh shit, I've got to finish off that book I was writing before the revolution." It's like, and I think he says something like, doing the revolution is a lot more interesting than actually writing about it. And yeah, writing about it is great, and it's important for like spreading ideas and getting people to read that is important. But that has to go hand in hand with you actually taking advantage of ongoing political situations, and then trying to push it in the direction that will serve working class interests. That's the ideal. That's what you need to be trying to accomplish, trying to achieve, where possible. Where you can make gains for the working class, try and make those gains. Try and build a movement that can make those gains, make those get those advantages, right? Because when a party that is a communist party is out there, not only pushing the theory and not only presenting the correct political line, but then also making gains for the working class, well, that's great, because then you bring more people to the cause. You say, look, this is proof of concept. This is the reality of what we've achieved. We've done some praxis, so we've gotten results. Here, is proof to what we can do and what can achieve. And this is also an important reason why we should stop people from disparaging various communist and socialist revolutions that have existed. And, instead of like going on and on, oh, this one was authoritarian, oh, all these people died, all these people, there's despotism, and all these people corrupt, this and the other, people will complain. But then you just that point to where it's like, well, look at all the gains they made. Look at all the industrialization that went on that not only saved lives, but increased the number of people who could live, for every death in the USSR, hundreds more lived because of, of that, even then, the death that we know, the death toll that we know is that's sort of pushed by liberals is like far higher than the actual reality when you actually go and look at the literature and the academic literature, not even just like socialist literature. I'm talking about like liberals writing actual academic, peer-reviewed histories of the USSR and looking at the actual evidence and all that. But I digress. And the point is, you need to be looking at practical examples, and practical examples of people trying to make revolution are very useful to us because we can draw from them, learn from them, and not just sort of sit in a classroom waiting for the next, the exact same perfect conditions as like the Bolshevik Revolution or the Chinese Revolution, and just, but going out and saying, okay, these are our current conditions, or these are conditions in other parts of the world. How can we help those movements and those struggles? There are struggles over in Palestine right now. There's struggles in South America right now, in Asia, all these like communist movements, socialist movements. How can we funnel support to them? How can we say, these are the groups that you should be supporting, that our country is supporting the opposition of? If you're in the imperial core, you are in a country that is helping back oppressive capitalistic forces in the third world that are trying to put down communistic forces. That's a place where you can do some practical activity, even if the situation right now in your country isn't ripe for revolution necessarily, right? There are so many opportunities for praxis that can build genuine change, and there are so many opportunities to work that into theory and work that into understanding the world around you, and understanding, applying the theory and showing people then, when you're trying to organize and trying to build a movement, look, no, it works. It can work. We can make these gains. We can make these changes, versus capitalism, where things are shit and things are increasingly getting shitter and shitter. Things are not getting better. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. And people need to understand that, and you show people that through praxis, or you show people that by pointing to praxis, not just dismissing it because it doesn't align with theory, not dismissing it because it isn't this pure revolution that we'd like it to be. Look at the ends, right? This idea, it's a liberal idea as well. It's especially a liberal idea that the ends don't justify the means, right? And usually it's like, if you kill somebody to make the world a better place, then, the ends didn't justify the means. Well, but, even with these sort of, we call them ultras, or we call them left comms, whatever term you want to use, these groups that are like very theory obsessed, very kind of like, we just need to keep reading the theory, keep trying to apply this theory in this very kind of dogmatic, puritanical way. and they'll sort of denounce these other revolutions where they made these gains, but they're like, but at what cost, you know? But at what cost? Which is kind of a dumb meme about like China at this point, where they've made these massive, massive technological, medical, social advancements, in political and democratic advancements that people do not want to talk about. They've made these advancements, and then people are just kind of ignoring them, and they're just trying to say, "Oh, okay, but yeah, but Mao, you know, he killed all the sparrows," or you know, "Oh, but yeah, Deng Xiaoping, oh yeah, he did capital. He was a capitalist roader, and he did capitalism. It was a reversion. It was a counter-revolution, and now you know, Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah, okay, but." It might be improving lives, but you know, there's also all these issues with the Belt and Road Initiative. There's oh, they shouldn't be imposing themselves, and it's still capitalistic. It's not socialistic. They're not funding insurgents in all these other countries. You know, it's just like, okay, it's not perfect, but even if you look at examples where it isn't perfect, right, and you want to build the perfect methodology in with your own movement, with your own party, with your own organization, you can still say, look, even this imperfect revolutionary struggle. Look at whether you want to say the Chinese one is imperfect or it's completely bad. You can say, look at these outcomes of the imperfect struggle. Now imagine what we can achieve with a more perfect struggle, right? Oh, look, they improved like society massively. They've gotten all these massive economic transformations. Everyone's got money in their pocket. Everyone's got a home, a roof over their heads. They've eliminated homelessness. They've eliminated these problems. And yes, but at what cost? But what if we could do it without the cost? We could do it without the cost, and we can do it without the cost through these methods. And I'm going to teach you these methods. You could present that to people. You can show, look, this is proof of concept. Look at Shanghai. Look at Guangzhou. Look at all these cities and places in China. You can point to Vietnam. You can point to Cuba. You can point to all these countries and say, look, it's not as despotic as they say it is. Or you can say, yeah, it is despotic. We can do that without the despotism, right? We can make the perfect revolution here. Like that's a selling point. That's a potential selling point. But then you just dismiss it out of hand. We don't appreciate what's being delivered to you on a silver platter. This example of revolutionary praxis that exists in the real world, that is somewhere people can visit, someone can take photos of. There's videos out there. There's actual books and histories and newspaper articles, everything explaining exactly what's going on there. And sometimes it's framed in this very like dystopian way. But you can say, look, no, look past the liberal bullshit. Look at the good aspects. Look at all these positive aspects. Now let's build those positive aspects here without the bullshit. You know what I mean? That's something you can achieve when you dismiss actual practical activity that exists in the real world and just abide by your perfect theory and just try and get people to believe in your cause based on very abstract ideas, very abstract ideas that are just in dusty old books. They're not going to buy what you're selling. They're not going to buy your movement. It's a you are engaged in a large political sphere where everyone's competing with everyone else for attention, for their ideology, for their cause, for their movement. You've got to be the best one. You've got the most attractive one. You can't just be correct. You can't just be the most correct, the most politically correct, philosophically correct, ideologically correct. You need to actually be able to present these ideas in a way that draw people in, and doing practical activity yourself and getting those results, or pointing to examples of practical activity and looking at their results and then saying, yeah, okay, there are limitations here and there, because you need to be honest. You need to be dialectical, right? You can't just say it's all perfect or it's all shit. You have to say it's imperfect, but we can do it better, and we can do it without this problem and this problem and this problem. Or do it yourself. Go out and do it yourself, and go out and show, okay, we made these attempts. We tried to get in through electoralism. It didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. We're going to show you all these things that we tried to do and the ways they sort of hampered us and prevented us from trying to make gains. And this is why we need to do things without an electoral methodology, without elections, why we need to focus on grassroots struggle, right? Or we can point to relevant contemporary examples of people trying to do the same and failing. That's also very useful. You don't just dismiss it out of hand. You don't just say, this doesn't work. You actually have to go onto the ground, do something. Because that's the other thing. People want to engage in something. People want to do something. Especially now where everything's going to shit. People feel like everything's horrible, everything's worse than ever, because the whole facade of the liberal utopia that they were promised, that was supposed to be ushered in after the fall of the Berlin Wall, it's shattered. That whole fantasy is just gone, and people don't believe it anymore. You've still got people who think, okay, we just need to get the right liberals back into power. There's others are like completely disillusioned with liberalism altogether, and they're like, okay, well, what's the next thing? And some people are going to fascism. A lot of people are going to the left. And on the left, there are a lot of people rebranding liberalism as socialism, right? And there are also a lot of actual leftists, actual communists saying, no, the liberals failed you because their whole system is flawed. This is broken. You work with us and we will achieve something. But the problem is, the ones that are just rebranding liberalism, we'll call them social democrats, call them democratic socialists, whatever you want to call them, their people are actually going out and doing stuff, and people want to actually be able to do stuff, or point to the idea that they've done something, or feel like they've tried to contribute, tried to fight back in some way. And if that means attending some like large-scale mass rally, or that means just joining a union, or joining a party and then voting once, that's good for them. That makes them feel like they've done something. And the problem is with people on the left, and the actual left, the real left, the ones that are getting drawn in are the ones that without any theory, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the anarchists and the other kind of radical, non-aligned kind of leftist groups that aren't very specific or very clear, very vague in what actual ideological grouping they fall under, right? These kinds of groups, because they're just engaging in activity, in whatever activity, like they'll just go somewhere, do a demo, go here, go there, here's a stool, we're going to set up a stool, we're going to do something with the stool, or we're going to do this here, without any real direction, but because it feels like they're doing something and there's vaguely socialistic in what they're doing and they're presenting, people are drawn to that. But if they feel like, and they'll get to a point where it's like, this is directionless, this isn't going anywhere, we're not achieving anything, then they go over back to these rebranded liberals, these social democrats, these democratic socialists, who are basically just doing liberalism, but with a sort of a red flag instead of a yellow one, or a blue one, light blue one if you're in the United States. And, they can go over to, the actual, like, these theory-obsessed people who aren't engaged in any kind of practical activity whatsoever, because they're like, this is pointless, this is pointless, this is pointless, this is pointless, this is pointless. And all they're doing is, like, printing a monthly newspaper, maybe like a fortnightly newspaper, or like a quarterly newspaper. They'll do like occasional kind of annual general meetings, and they focus mostly on like recruitment, but not actually using those recruits for anything. They'll show up at places and they'll sell the newspapers, or they'll like push their agenda, annoy people with their agenda, and that's like the most amount of activity they do. But there's a majority which aren't even like organized at all. They haven't joined any party because no party is perfect enough for them. They haven't engaged with any kind of left-wing group. They're just kind of online. It's the whole, I hate the whole terminally online meme, but it is kind of what it is. They're just kind of on Twitter yelling at people and calling them reformists, or calling them Nazis for being like Marxist-Leninists or something. And then, these people, okay, the theory, the basics of Marxist theory, right? But if you're not out there organizing people in a party, even if it's an imperfect party, then you're just leaving room for the liberals and even fascist Nazbol types to just take over, right? So, you got to get out of that cave. You got to go and try and organize and try and do shit. Um, or you're just going to be stuck yelling at people through a computer for the rest of your life because oh, I've read Capital and I understand Capital perfectly, and you don't understand it perfectly, and I'm gonna just quote things at you, and like that will win the argument, and when I win the argument, that's how we'll build community. That doesn't work. You need to actually engage in real practical activity in the real world. You need to actually go into join an organization that really exists, that's actually on the streets and actually trying to recruit people, whether it's a mass organization, whether it's kind of a small knit organization, whatever it is. Well, you need to engage in that. You need to do that, right? Now, I've talked a lot of shit about like just reading theory and not doing practical activity, but there is a big, big, big problem. I should say, honestly, a bigger problem. Mostly because it's there are more people who are doing this than just reading the theory. And the thing that most people are doing when they're on this kind of broad sort of left sphere is focusing far more on the praxis and just disavowing theory and just ignoring theory. Now, there's this perception, I think, theory is just kind of like dry nerd shit, right? It's just a bunch of like old texts written by old white men. It's the common sort of joke or meme, whatever, which supposedly explain revolution, but they're not applicable to today or whatever. And I think a lot of it is just to the fact that people don't understand what theory even is, right? Theory isn't just reading Marx, right? And theory isn't just reading Capital. Theory isn't just reading the specific canon of books as well. It definitely isn't reading a canon, right? I think this is a big problem. I think it's goes back to these people who are theory obsessed and they just like stick to the specific canon of books. I'm like, there'll be like points where I've talked to these kinds of people where I'm like, oh, you should read Engels. And they're like, no, Engels didn't understand Marx, fuck Engels. And I'm like, what the fuck are you saying, fuck Engels? Are you stupid? Anyway, the point is, when you get to like, these people who are just praxis obsessed and they don't want to do anything to with theory, want anything to do with theory, right? And they think, okay, I don't want to read these books, these old books, have nothing to do with the present day, and I don't want to read like these like 10 books on this reading list. There's a lot of these reading lists out there. But like it doesn't just have to be those books, there are a lot of recent publications that you can draw ideas from that just deal with a basic dialectical materialist framework. Some of them are quite limited, right? So I wouldn't recommend all of them. Like you go to like the Verso store page, and there's like a bunch of leftist text there, and it's a real mix, right? You've got a lot of trot stuff, and then you've got a lot of like radlib kind of shit, and then there's like a lot of like ML stuff is kind of quietly mixed in for some reason that they kind of deny as ML stuff because they're fucking weirdos at Verso. I don't know what the hell they're doing. Verso, monthly review press is usually better. They got some good stuff. One of my favorites is Iskra books. You read anything from there, you're gonna walk away with some interesting stuff. And some of it's old stuff. They've got all of Stalin stuff reprinted, but some of it's like brand new shit. It's like some like European communists, like European communists in the last like they've written these books in the last like 5-10 years. Pick that shit up, pick that up, give it a read. It's language you're going to understand. It's a modern language, contemporary language. It's not going to be too difficult for you. And again, it's difficult for a lot of people who haven't been pushed to read anything beyond like fucking classics of American literature or whatever, where it's just like boring ass shit about like sad depression era Americans, and they're like oh, my life is so sad or whatever, or it's like Shakespeare or something, and it's just like, it's Shakespeare, you pretend you understand it, you watch the movie adaptation, not really a movie adaptation, it'll be like a TV adaptation that sets Macbeth in fucking Afghanistan or something, and then you watch it, you pretend to understand the thing again, and then you just like, to pass the GCSE, you read like the study guide and just copy things from memory from the study guide into your exam. It's yeah, I think people that go on about the literacy problem, they like go, "Oh, Gen Z, they don't know how to read. They're evil Zoomers, and they'll be the millennials. They don't know how to read." The problem is they didn't give us a chance because of all this YA shit, this young adult shit, which is like very simplistic books, very simplistic reading. English literature classes not very inspiring. And when he gets to actually trying to read actual books, I'm not talking about fucking fiction books, I'm talking about non-fiction books. Actual books with actual useful information, practical information that isn't just there to help you pass a specific exam, a specific course. It isn't like this structured in this very, very neat and tidy way, so you can just like pull the information out and then plug it into an exam um, sheet. When it's something like a biology work where it's explaining here are my theories about newts and their reproductive processes or whatever, or in the case of like when we're talking about Marxist theory especially, which some of it is quite scientific, like earth sciences, natural sciences kind of thing, but a lot of it is like philosophy with Marxist works. There are quite a lot of philosophy. If you're not used to reading like fucking on a Plato or Hegel, which is Marx inspired, Kant, guys like that, you're going to be a bit like put off by Marx and stuff at first because it's a very kind of weird way of writing. And so I don't know, that's a sort of big digression. The point is like I get why people are kind of like um kind of hesitant to engage with theory and kind of feel like they find it very daunting. And there's a lot of nerds out there be like, "Oh, it's so easy. What do you mean you can't read theory? I read it for fun. I just sort of breeze through it for fun." And you go, "Fuck off, man. You don't read this shit for fun. If you're reading it for fun, then you don't understand what you're reading. You're just kind of skimming through." I'm going to say, I'm going to be honest, right? I don't believe that you're reading it for fun. And if that makes me sound dumb, well, okay, maybe I'm dumb, but like, no, you aren't. You aren't. Stop lying, right? This shit is not the most fun to read. I mean, there's aspects of fun to read. Marx is a very kind of witty writer. He makes these little jokes and shit. They actually kind of like make you laugh while you're reading. Like, when she was like going off in some like liberal or anarchist or something. It's fun, right? But then a lot of it is this very like dense economic. Like he's just like pouring all this economic data, and you're reading Capital. If you've ever read Capital, we get past the first few chapters, and it's just like here's this whole ass table that's describing industrial output in this specific year in the 19th century, and it's like, what the fuck am I reading? He's like going through all these details, and obviously it was relevant then, and it's still kind of relevant because it's proving his point. It's evidence to justify what he's saying, but it is hard to just like read through. It's not a breezy. It's not a leisurely read, right? And maybe there were people in like the 1900s. I think they were very kind of boring people back then that could have like gone through it, but like we've got other things to do when we want to do something sort of leisurely. We want to do something recreationally. Marx's theory or theory in general is better for just like you want to actually sit down and learn something. That's the whole point of these books. So like, okay, you don't want to do the old school kind of writings. That you can find newer stuff. Again, Monthly Review Press, Verso, Iskra Books. There's a bunch out there. People in the comments just throw out your recommendations. There's a load out there that you can look at. There's articles, there's newspapers, there's blogs. There's plenty of people doing effectively theory, because theory isn't just like hard philosophy, right? It's not just Das Kapital or German ideology, anti-Düring, what's another one like nature, dialectics of nature. What's Lenin's one? His one is dialectics. It's it's dialectics of imperio-criticism, something like that. It's not all that stuff like that. A lot of it is this very kind of straightforward, hey, so this thing just happened in 1926, and here's what my thoughts are on it. And you look up, okay, the specific historical things, or they'll lay it out for you. Like the Tsar did this today, and it was kind of shitty. And then you sort of, oh, okay, cool. And then you understand where they're coming from. And that's theory. That is what theory is. It's taking the basic ideas of Marxist thought and saying, here's a situation that's happening in the real world, and then applying it to that. A great way to do it, if you want very, very up-to-date contemporary examples, is all these communist parties, all these socialist parties, they all have newspapers, and they're all writing newspapers with a kind of a materialist lens, a dialectical materialist lens, to explain ongoing issues. Right? Go and find these papers. They're all out there for free. You find whatever the local communist party in your area is. Find their newspaper. They're bound to have one. There's newspapers out there from decades ago. If you want something old school that you're interested in, and find their take on it, just go and find it. I'm sure you find like a bunch of stuff from COVID era, and they'll be like explaining COVID through this materialist lens. Theory can also be like the YouTubers and the podcasters, like me. This would probably count as theory, right? It's not a great theory. I wouldn't say it's great theory what you're listening to right now, but it's theory nonetheless, right? It's not, Marx, but it's something, right? But it is also better to read this stuff as well, because I think when people actually write theory, the process of doing it is also not always, but it tends to be a lot more of a well thought out process, right? And they're actually putting a lot of thought and effort into it, and they're rethinking stuff and doing stuff. Me, I'm just talking right now, right? And I'm just saying whatever, right? This is why it's important to actually go and read someone's actually taking the time to actually think out and actually put on paper, and then saying, no, this is wrong, and they redraft it and they redraft it and redraft it. They put notes in notebooks when they think of something, and they go back and then copy it in. This is how Marx worked, this is how Lenin worked, this is how all these people worked. Sometimes they just like throw something together and then publish it in a newspaper or whatever. But a lot like the top works, the big works, those took time to write. They didn't just like do it in a day. They didn't just shit it out, right? They took their time. This is why, versus a YouTube video where, I'm not saying all these YouTubers don't take their time, don't put their full effort into it, but at the end of the day, it is a far more disposable medium. It's treated as a far more disposable medium. There are some people who put a lot of effort into their work, and they should be highlighted. Guys like Hakeem, guys like Second Thought to some extent. Those people like, okay, great. But when you look like these like streamer types who they're on stream live, they're saying whatever, they're probably thinking, they've probably thought these thoughts before. I'm not saying they're completely thoughtless and just saying whatever. Okay, I did say that, but you know what I mean? They're not just talking at their ass completely, but they are, they're not necessarily putting the full sort of method into what they're writing. They're not like meditating, they're not writing something, reading it over, correcting it, changing what they wrote, choosing specific word choice and things like that. And this is why actual written theory is better usually, and why you should go out and find books as much as possible. Where books aren't possible, find articles. Where articles aren't possible, okay, go to YouTube and go to podcasts and things like that. And if you want something you can listen to, there's a lot of people out there turning theory articles into audiobooks, into audio recordings that you can listen to and engage with. That is theory. Theory isn't just about these stodgy old books. It's everything. It's just leftist writing in general. That's what theory is. Theory is just left-wing writing in general that is giving you ideas about the world and applying leftist thinking to, and Marxist theory would apply specifically the dialectical materialist thought, but broadly left theory would apply other forms of thought and other philosophical worldviews and methodologies and so on. And it's important to engage with this stuff, because otherwise your praxis is going to be really shit, right? Because if you have no fucking clue what you're doing, if you're not actually have like a cohesive idea of how you're engaging with the praxis you're doing and what you're attempting to achieve with it and what your big plans are, if you don't have like an ideological foundation behind what you're doing, like a strong, coherent ideological foundation, that is the most important thing. If you're just like, I'm a leftist and I don't know what that means, you just have a vague idea of what leftism is, and everyone's defining it differently, and right, you're not going to get anywhere because you're not going to achieve anything. There's this misconception that liberals and other right-wing people, they don't read theory. Of course they read theory. The ones at the top, the people like right at the tippy top of the whole pyramid, the ones that are like in political office or people who are like making serious money, right? The serious people, right? There's the Elon Musks of the world who kind of luck into what they're doing. There's the Donald Trumps who are, he's Donald Trump. He hasn't read a fucking book in his life. Um, but you like a Barack Obama, a Hillary Clinton, these people have read books. They have read a lot of books, right? Um, and they'll have read liberal theory. They'll have read like fucking Hobbes and shit. You'll have read like old works by. They wouldn't have necessarily read a lot of old works. They would have read a lot of newer works. They'll have read of stuff that's like glazing the founding fathers, talking about how great they are, and talking about how we need to apply their teachings in the past to today or whatever. That's the American one. Britain is the same sort of thing. All these people have read books. All these like these kind of people who've gone to Eton, they've read books. They've gone to Oxford, they've read fucking books. They've read this shit. They know this shit. They've studied political science. They've got universities. They've read books. They know what they're talking about. They can engage with this shit in a meaningful way. And the masses, the people who generally kind of vote liberal, who would consider liberals in a broader sense, they wouldn't have read. They wouldn't have necessarily read. Their liberal theory is kind of just the general media they consume on a daily basis anyway. That is liberal theory. Everything, the majority of stuff that they consume is liberal theory. But this is what separates a communist, like an actual sort of on-the-ground communist or socialist or whatever, from a liberal. It's the fact that we can actually make the ideology our own. We can actually do the reading ourselves. We're not just relying on representatives to be the ones that are doing the reading. We are trying to represent ourselves, so we should do the reading. We should have a fundamental understanding of politics at to a great degree, to a meaningful degree. It's not just about allowing other people to do the thinking for you. You need to be able to do the thinking. That's democracy. That's what democracy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be rule of the people. But if the majority of people are fucking dumbasses, if the majority of people are fucking idiots who haven't read a fucking political theory work in their entire life, how the hell are they supposed to be one of the rulers in society? Which is why then we have this representative democracy where we're just sort of delegating our entire leadership to these rich shits who have been forced to read by their private schools and read the right stuff, and then get to lead the country and to serve their own interests, and where the working class and normal people aren't able to represent their own interests because they haven't read any books, they haven't read any theory, they haven't read any political thought, any historical ideas, any philosophy or anything like that, and they don't have anything really guiding them, right? And that's something we need. We need a real understanding of politics. We need a real understanding of philosophy. We need a framework. And in my mind, in my view, the best framework is the dialectical materialist framework, which is often attributed to Marx and Engels. But okay, fine. If you want to be an anarchist, go find an anarchist framework. Go read Bookchin. Go read fucking Bakunin. Go read who else? Who's the other fucking anarchists? All these fucking people. Kropotkin. All these fucking people. Whoever those fucking people are, right? I'll read Marx. I'll read Engels. I'll read fucking Lenin. I'll read Stalin. Stalin's great. I'll read Mao. I'll read and I'll read more modern people as well. Rockhill, Gabriel Rockhill, great. Read him. These are people that can help guide the way we're thinking about our praxis. When we have actual ideological understanding, that is just as important for helping us do praxis. Now, okay, we can draw theory from a praxis, right? And I said that earlier. Doing praxis helps us develop a theoretical understanding of the world. But here's the thing, we don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily. We've got all these books out there, right? And just so I was saying earlier about pointing to these actual revolutionary movements that have existed as examples of practical examples of what can be achieved and what gains can be made. Those are also extremely important use cases that we can use to say, hey, these people tried this thing in 1953. It didn't work. And they didn't work for these specific reasons. How have the conditions changed in our current circumstances to make something like that work? Or should we try and do things in a different direction, right? That's the sort of thing that theory can allow us to understand in our praxis. So instead of wasting our time trying to reinvent the wheel, do the same things over and over and over again without learning from our mistakes, or learning from things that were well-meaning and theoretically correct, but didn't actually achieve anything, we can do new things that haven't been tried yet and then make new gains, or find the stuff that does work and do those things and do them better than they did them, ideally, That's why we read theory. It's not just about it's not about a dogma, it's not about a religion, it's not about learning the right way of the universe and understanding the way the universe works and all that. It's about understanding fundamentally that what the past looks like and what revolutionary movements look like, and developing an outlook on the world that is a little bit more critical and a little bit more analytical. That's looking at the world in this different way, in a way that would serve the movement and serve how we do things. Bringing in other ideas, bringing in other thinkers is not a bad thing. I thought that was a liberal ideal, pluralism. But, apparently liberals love just being in their own heads and concocting their own ideas and their own thoughts out of nothing. And then when they try and put those ideas to praxis, it just falls to shit. And they're like, wait, what the fuck? Why did this fail? Like, let's look at a couple of real examples, right? Let's look at some of the praxis going on out there, right? This No More Kings thing that keeps happening over in the US. I've seen them in the fucking UK as well. The fuck they're doing in the UK, I don't know. Where they're effectively just anti-Trump protests, right? They're anti-Trump protests. And it's not very clear what their actual aim is. They're just kind of out on the street saying, no more kings and we're anti-Trump. Basically, that's the whole idea. And, from that, people are able to sort of push, I think people have been using that as a way of pushing pro-Palestinian ideas. People have been using that as a way to promote sort of anti-ICE ideas, pro-immigrant ideas. And there's a lot of people using that as a means to push pro-liberal ideas as well, fundamentally. So that's the good thing, quote unquote, about a movement like that, where it doesn't really have a real meaning, doesn't really have an ideological foundation, seemingly, where it can just be whatever anybody wants, and then you can just build this sort of situation where everyone's out in the streets and it looks like something's happening, but then nothing's actually happening because it's not a real movement. It's just kind of people, right? Now, Black Lives Matter, that was a movement that had some a real kind of ideological goal there. There was a ideological foundation, a real political goal. Defund the police. That also very clear political goal, very clear aim, and a very clear ideological foundation there as well, right? It was anti-cop. That's the ideology. Anti-cop in a way that's sort of critical of policing and how we're doing policing and how policing should be defunded and stop being so overfunded versus other essential services and things like that. Now, I think these movements were essentially liberal, but they were coherent enough. When you have No More Kings is just is completely incoherent because it doesn't mean anything, right? So much so that when they did it in the UK, right, they had to change the name of the protest because people thought it was an anti-monarchist protest. They didn't want to seem to be against King Charles. No, you should be fucking against King Charles just as much as you're against Donald Trump. How fucking stupid are you? Are you No More Kings, or are you no kings except for this one? I guess that is. It's No More Kings. They're fine with all the other kings that exist. They just don't want a king in America, I guess. That's where they draw the line. Which is just, it proves the sort of the idiocy of the whole thing. They're okay with kings existing. They're okay with monarchism. They just don't want this specific guy to become a monarch. And there'll be guys who probably be okay with like a fucking Obama or someone becoming a monarch. These liberals, because they don't really understand what they're doing. They're just kind of saying shit. This vibes-based politics, this vibes-based protesting. Well, that's the whole thing. Every time when you talk about, oh, it was so nice, it was so great to be around people, and everyone's like very happy and dancing, and it's very positive. It's not a hate movement. You know, like okay, it should be fucking hate. It should be a hate movement. It should be a hate movement against. If you're anti-Trump, be anti-Trump. Be fucking anti-Trump. Call for his head. Call for something nasty to happen to him. Be a fucking anti-Trump movement. Don't be a fucking this whole fucking it's this all the shit that we're spewing in like 2016, which is like I love Trump's hate or something like that. Fuck that. It's the same shit, and they just keep rebranding it over and over. But you see what I mean? It's like this completely incoherent, completely sort of just zero ideological content whatsoever. This can be for anyone and every movement that somewhat aligns somewhere, right? And it makes it look like there's some kind of grassroots thing, but no, it's completely fucking astroturfed. Firstly, it's completely astroturfed. You look at the groups that are starting this shit; they're all DNC people. It's but this is the important thing to push. It's the important why we need theory, because you end up with stupid shit like that where they don't really know what their message is and they don't really know what they're trying to do. They call something no more kings and then they're actually pro king. You know what I mean? They call something no more kings and it's like, okay, but what does that mean? You don't want him to be a king, but he technically is not a king. You just mean you don't want to be a dictator, right? Because say no more dictators, or say no dictatorship, no fascism. Say no fascism. Jesus, they couldn't say that though because the Democrats love fascism. You know what I mean? They can't say no fascism because they support the fascists in Israel. They support the fascists in all over the world that serve American interests. So they can't say no more fascism. They love fascism. But yeah, this is the problem. This is why you need some ideological coherence. You need an ideological foundation for your movement, for your thing. It's not enough to just go out in the streets and do something. That's what I heard when people were criticizing No More King. It's like, well, at least they're out in the streets. At least they're doing something. It's like, okay, but what the fuck are they doing? What are they doing? They're just standing around having a fucking street party. That's not something. That's just nothing. It's a waste of energy. Literally, it's a waste of energy. Like, they're out doing this when they could be out doing actual practical actions and focusing on specific local issues or national issues. Why aren't they fucking marching in Washington? Use that energy for that. Use the resources for that. You're handing out free masks and shit for this. That's money you could be using to bus people to Washington, bus people, like, do the Million Man March, do something meaningful. You can have something with a coherent political message instead of just sort of wasting this shit, and then people get tired and they don't come to the next one, or they don't come to the thing next week. This is my point. Resources are scarce, right? And resources have to be allocated efficiently, and then you need to, and labor power, it is a resource. It's something that everybody has. They have a limited reserve of it. They have maybe 8 hours in a day that they can utilize, maybe 8 to 12 hours. That needs to be doled out in the best way possible. You don't want to waste people's time and energy doing useless shit. Have them doing something real. Have them doing something with a real coherent purpose. And yeah, I think socialists did make good advantage of this by going to these places and trying to say, look, we need to push an anti-imperialist stance, we need to push this stance, that stance, and that's good. But the movement as a whole was meaningless because it wasn't actually doing anything practical, right? And it wasn't doing anything in a way that it wasn't even pushing a message or an idea that made sense, right? And this is why their opposition, which is laughing at them, right? Whereas if you had been out there calling for his fucking head, you had 1 million people out there calling for his fucking head, literally calling for his fucking head, they would have been pissing their pants, and they would have been so angry, and they would have been so upset, and that's even better, right? And that might just sound like childish trolling, but like, no, that actually sends a message. If you get 1 million people out there very openly saying, we hate this guy, we want him to fucking go somewhere, you know what I mean? And you know somewhere I mean, then, you actually cause some actual change, you know what I mean? Not even change, but you get a message across, you get a real message across. No More Kings doesn't mean anything, because you can wave that way. You did wave that way, so I'm not a king. It's just like, it's laughable and it's stupid. It's very easy to deflect, and this is what liberals love. It's Uh, but this is my point, right? You need to have some theory. You need to have an idea of like who your enemy is as well. You need to have an idea. Okay, you're anti-Trump, but why are you anti-Trump? What's wrong with him? Is it just because he's a rude guy? Is it just because he's making an embarrassment out of the presidency? Is it because he knocked down a wall in the White House? How dare he? Is it, or is it because he's a sexual abuser? Is he because he sexually assaulted people? That's a real thing. Do something around that. Is it because he's a criminal? Is it because he's a convicted felon? I mean, that's kind of a weird one to be like, oh, I hate him because of the convicted felon. Because it's like, do you know how many normal, nice people are convicted felons out there because of how shitty the justice system is and how unequal things are economically? Why? Okay, we're just going to go after him because he's convicted felon. Okay, but that's a coherent message and do something around that. So lock him up, lock up Trump. Why wouldn't it call lock up Trump? No more kings. Lock up Trump. That's fucking easy. It's not even called for violence. It's very easy. Just look him up. It's just fucking right there for you. He fucking created the slogan. He said lock her up. You said lock him up. Then make that the whole fucking movement. Jesus. Ah, man. These fucking people. Like, you have, it doesn't need to be, I'm not saying that everything needs to be Marxist. I'm saying just have some kind of basic understanding of what you're doing at a theoretical level. This isn't nerd shit, okay? It's a bit nerdy, fine. But you need nerds actually guiding your shit. Otherwise, you get the wrong kind of nerds guiding your shit, and they just turn it into a fucking farce. Like, there's No More Kings, where it's just a bunch of Democrat think tank types that are like, okay, we need to build political capital for ourselves and keep people linked to the democratic movement, the Democratic Party, and all this shit. How do we do that? Okay, just I guess we do this protest movement with a slogan that doesn't mean anything and doesn't actually commit us to try and do anything, and then yeah, we can make waves that way. And it's just like, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, you get up in the polls and that's it. That's what you achieved today. You got some Democrats up in the polls. It's just fucked, man. Or I guess Donald Trump, I think, went down. I don't think we actually did much for the actual Democrats, but uh, like find something, right? And this is the other thing. Like when you read theory, when you read actual theory, right? And you read older stuff. This is the important thing. This is why you read older stuff. It's why you don't just read the newer stuff, which is anti-Trump. Like, there's the big problem with the newer stuff. A lot of newer stuff, so the rad lib shit. It's so fixated on Trump. And it's like, how did we get to Trump? What is wrong with Trump? Why is Trump so bad? But you go out and read shit from the 1800s, and Marx is talking about a completely different reactionary, right? About different reactionaries that fit the same kind of description in terms of what Trump is practically, not just what he is personality, but what he actually, the actual historical and social role he plays in society, right? Um, and you find this guy, Marx will be talking about these people, and like, this is how these reactionaries came to power, and these are how these reactionaries helped stop revolutionary momentum. And you're like, oh shit, okay, so it's not just Trump that's the problem, because when Marx is talking about these reactionaries, and Lenin's talking about reactionaries, and Mao's talking about them, all these other people are talking about them, they're talking about these people in relation to capitalism. And you look at how Marx defines capitalism. Yeah, you look how he defines capitalism, and he's defining it in terms of the relationship to the means of production. He's talking about it in terms of who owns those means of production, right? And he's talking about a capitalist class, and he's talking about the capitalist class as being the one that is allowing these reactionaries and helping these reactionaries and guiding these reactionaries always. And that is something we can then apply to our real world conditions. And instead of fixating on one fucking guy, we can say, oh shit, there's all these people around him that are propping him up. Not just the people in his cabinet, but the people on supposedly on the other side of the fence, the opposition. And they all brought him to power. And it's all one big fucking class that is allowing all this shit to happen. Therefore, what we should be saying is not no more kings, no more capitalists, no more billionaires, no more oligarchs, no more no more industrialists, no more capitalism. Right? That would then become the slogan. They don't want that to be the slogan. They want it to be something abstract and metaphorical and just kind of ridiculous and anachronistic with no more kings, and then it can mean whatever anyone wants. And that's how they sort of get you. And this is why you need to read theory. You need to have your own kind of conception of the world that is grounded in political fact. You don't need to read Marxism. If you're, I mean, this is obviously a communist channel, and I'm posting this, going to post this in communist section. So if you're really watching this, you're probably a communist listening to this, whatever. You're probably a communist, but like, you know, this is the thing to tell liberals and tell these people, don't just say, okay, read Marx. Like, read something, read some political theory, read fucking, what's that guy called? Ta-Nehisi Coates, the guy who wrote the Black Panther comics recently. That guy, read him, you know, that's something. Read something coherent. He's better than the most of the liberals, right? Read something like that. Read something like read fucking Chomsky. You know, he's a bit more coherent than, or a bit more like, there's more substance to something he writes than something like the fucking New York Times op-ed or whatever, right? Read stuff like that at bare minimum, right? Tell liberals to read stuff like that bare minimum. Ideally they're gonna start, like, you want them to read like fucking Mao, you want them to read fucking Lenin. But okay, they're not going to do that because we're all scary communists. But read something that actually gives you a better handle on society at large, right? And so it's not just so fixed on like one bloke. It's looking at the whole system as it's existed for centuries at this point, and how this one guy fits into this whole system. How he's just kind of a cog in a whole system. And then you can sort of engage in Praxis in a meaningful way. You know which movements to join and which ones are just a waste of time and energy, which ones that you can then hijack in a meaningful way to push a message or an idea that others aren't pushing for. Well, yeah, that's that rant done, I think. You know, we need a balance between theory and praxis. You need both. You need both. And I think this group that's so theory focused is fucking annoying. But this group that is just praxis focused is also fucking annoying. It's not enough to just go and vote. It's not enough to just go and protest. Like, yeah, you because people say this shit to me all the time. Oh, I'm a better socialist than you because I've done this much practical activity. I've been a card-carrying member of the Labour Party for this many years. I went to this protest. I went to that protest. I was protesting the Iraq War. It's like, that doesn't mean shit, mate. That doesn't mean shit when you're also like pushing like slurs and shit online. Like, what the fuck are you doing there? You know, that's what I mean. Like, these people have no theory, and the theory that would push them away from like chauvinism, or from making silly errors in what they're arguing, or making arguments in favor of capitalism, things like that. They wouldn't be doing those things if they'd read a little bit. You know what I mean? It's not just enough to go and protest sort of an abstract thing. You have to have an idea of who the enemy is, and the enemy is the ruling class, it's the bourgeois class, it's the bourgeoisie in league with the aristocracy and the clergy and all these other classes that have waning or still moderate influence in certain countries or others. And my point is, um, fucking read theory, but also engage in direct action. Not direct action, but praxis. Okay, do both. Do both. I'm sick and tired of people like acting like one is superior to the other and disparaging people who only do one and not the. Well, no, disparaging people who try to do both and then not doing, you know, both themselves. So it's just, yeah, fuck that. All right, that's the end of that. Bye bye.